Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the ManOn2nd podcast. My name is Eric Wiedeke, and as always, I'm joined by Joe Frisaro. Got a lot to talk about this week, Joe. How about it?
Yeah. Before we dive in, let's talk about our little partnership we got with Dugout Mugs. You see here the Dugout Mugs mug, the aluminum. I got my Marlins mug. It came in. It's great. Keeps it cool and refreshing, and the look is just awesome. I know baseball fans and sports fans all over probably have their collections. Dugout mugs. You see, Eric put the URL in the bottom of the screen. But if you like what we're doing, want to support us a bit, and like Dugout Mugs, go visit their website, dugoutmugs.com/ManOn2nd, and order yours today. Again, these are great gifts. And hopefully, when spring training gets going, we'll be bringing them up to the park as well. But in the meantime, order your Dugout Mugs /ManOn2nd. And as for baseball right now, obviously, Eric, frustrating time to be a baseball fan, no, without any doubt.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much out there, and none of it seems positive. We're getting to the point where players are clearly getting frustrated, and they're starting to vocalize those frustrations on social media. Um, it's starting to. I mean, most of the offseason, baseball's kind of been able to kind of coast on this with all the other things that are going on. But the closer you get to spring training, the more eyes that you have on this situation. And it feels like it's just a constant spot that we're in where, people who aren't diehard baseball fans, they see this every single spring, it feels like, where the players and the owners just can't seem to get along. And it's really getting to the point where, it's hurting the sport. And on top of that, we might get to a point where, at least at this point, it seems likely, and I'm sure we'll touch on this a little bit more, that the season's going to be delayed. It just seems like it's a disastrous situation at this point.
Yeah. First work stoppage, just for perspective, because I was hoping it would never even reach this point of frustration. But first work stoppage since 1994-95. So not in your lifetime have you ever seen baseball shut down. I unfortunately have seen it shut down many times. It was when I started at MLB.com in 2002 up until now. They resolved all issues without a work stoppage. There were some bumpy roads and some negotiations that's kind of par for the course. But to get to the point where now, like you noted, this is the third straight year of weirdness, and instability and friction that was manifested from, since the last agreement, I believe, was in 16. And it started basically, you could really feel the temperature rising in the summer of 2020 when neither side could get an agreement on how to relaunch the season after shutting down when we were in the middle of a lockdown, a pandemic lockdown, and neither side was seemingly able to without friction and bad blood to get the season going. Eventually, it did get going with a 60-game season and so forth. Then we know 2021 started off with protocols, and then this was in the backdrop, and then right after the World Series, the rhetoric really heated up, and December 2nd, just a quick little timeline, is when the MLB locked down the players. Now, if they did not do so, then they continued on with the current expired agreement. The players could strike at any time. So the purpose of the lockout was in hopes of getting the sides to talk. As we know, it didn't really happen in December, a little bit in January, but no traction. And here we are in early February, and spring training scheduled to start February 16th with pitchers, catchers reporting. And the first games, February 26th, would have been the Marlins' first spring game. These are seemingly going to be dates and deadlines that are not going to be made.
Yes, I mean, certainly not at this point. There was reports that and I know that this is something that we had planned on touching on a little bit later, but There were those reports that the league had sought federal mediation, and the players' union has denied that. I'm not certain what that means in terms of the negotiation aspect of it, because there's so much of it that we're just not privy to. But there are some harsh accusations being levied from the players' side about the owners not really going about this in a good faith manner. Um, it's just, I mean, at this point, the temperature around it is so high, and things just seem so contentious that you wonder about the ability, when they do sit down together, to kind of put us. I mean, obviously, when there's money on the table, that solves a lot of problems in terms of putting aside a lot of personal vitriol. Um, but there is a little bit of that bridge that needs to be rebuilt, because it feels like it's being burnt.
Yeah, and what you're saying from the public and the right now the PR war is going on. The sides are trying to state their claim. They're using social media, other platforms, and so forth. That's common in these negotiations. But the job of the negotiators, the ones wear the legal hats or the lawyers and so forth, is to get a deal done, whether or not the two sides like each other and will have have lunch afterward or dinner. That's not so much the issue. It's their jobs to get a deal done, however that happens. So I don't see that animosity really being a factor in the room, because the deal is done. You do wonder, though, if there's an agreement reached that um, isn't satisfactory to one side, what kind of trust would be moving forward after this gets resolved, and then you got to build back the public trust. But
Right.
let's start with some where we are right now. What we know is going on this week. The MLB owners will be meeting in Orlando beginning tomorrow. I believe it runs through Thursday. So the owners now will gather in this week in Orlando, and they will kind of bat around their ideas. And then after that, it is believed that that's when they will return to, their proposal or counter proposal to the Players Association. And then you would seem to be, that would be another round of sitting down and negotiating. The issue there, though, as we know, with, February 16th being the report day, that means that this whole week is just going to be kind of getting a direction and what moves are next. It's not actual negotiating. And two really sticky points to my understanding, and there are many. One is arbitration. The players seem to want to move it to 2 years. The owners are adamant it won't be until after 3 years. And if those are non-starters, then you're not even getting a very basic off the ground. So
Right.
they're going to that's hard. And we'll touch on some more broader scale. The player side, after reading some reports there from Andrew Miller, talking about some issues. He had a story, and he was quoted an ESPN story I read. I'd recommend it. It's on Twitter. Just go to Buster Only or Jesse Rogers, I believe, wrote the story. I encourage to read that to get what Andrew had to say. And we could talk more in themes here, Eric. It's some concerns. Obviously, you want to see the competitive balance improve. You don't want to see 110 lost teams and that type of thing. And how do you avoid tanking? How do you avoid making these years of rebuilds and try to create a system that allows teams to have a better shot more on a year in year out basis rather than this is our small window to compete, and then if it doesn't work, we have to break it up because of the finances of, and these are markets we care a lot about: South Florida here in Miami, Tampa Bay as well, here in the state of Florida, as we address. And in theory, yes, but I don't know, how do you do it?
Right, because it's kind of this catch-22 where both sides theoretically, more so from the league perspective, you want that competitive balance. But then you have the small market teams that may not want to be forced to have to pay up and you don't want the large market teams that are going to have the inevitable cap put on them to kind of create that parity that you want. And then from the players' perspective, you know, they want their 10-year, $400 million deals from the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Dodgers. But at the same time, you know, they want the Pirates and the Marlins to kind of spend a little bit of money to at least attempt to be competitive. And I use those two teams just as examples of small market organizations. My greater point being is it's kind of this gray area where both sides have to weigh the pros and cons of what they're really trying to achieve. And I think that it's kind of something that going into these negotiations, both sides, you know, competitive balance, you know, it sounds nice, but when you get into the nitty gritty of what that requires you to do, I think it kind of muddies the sentiment, and, you know, it's a lot more complex when you look at it from that perspective.
Yeah. And I throw this because to me, it's almost conflicting. You have 10 teams out of 30 make the playoffs. MLB wants to make it 14. The unions wants more of 12. Well, if the idea is to get more teams to compete, then why aren't the players wanting 14 teams in? And I'm not saying that's a good number, better than the other one. I do think it dilutes it a little bit more. But right now, I don't know if the Marlins are a playoff caliber team with roster as is with a 10 team. There are a little bit chances with a 12, and it's certainly much better with 14, just as is.
Right.
So, yes, it's going to create more mediocrity, but you would have, you know, and maybe some of the early rounds of the playoffs aren't great, but baseball's a little bit different than football. We talked about this a few weeks ago with the NFL and their playoffs, and we saw, you know, some really bad first round games in the NFL playoffs because teams were scraping in at 9 and whatever been now with a 17 game season, you know, 9 and 8 or whatever they were, and you know, do we want that in baseball? I guess the answer kind of is yes. If you don't want teams to go the other way, we can't speak out of both sides of our mouth and say, no, we don't want this. We want only this high brow and high caliber of playoff team. Yet, you know, when you're going to have a lot of mediocre teams floundering about, is 82 and 80 a playoff team? Well, you could get to 81 and 81 could get in.
I think it's,
you could get 79 and 83 could get in.
Yeah, and I think from the player's perspective, in terms of wanting 12 versus 14, at least if I were to try to kind of logically walk through that thought process, I guess I would kind of say the idea there is that you don't want a bunch of average, mediocre teams sitting on their hands, and you want those teams that would be that 13th, 14th, 15th team to kind of, you know, be striving and try to make additions at the deadline rather than, well, you know, we're average, we'll probably slip in.
But on the flip side, not to cut you off,
right?
What incentives there to trade anybody then?
True.
I mean, you're sitting around and saying you're sitting on your hands, but okay. Now on the flip side, if you're going to punish the Orioles, you know, because they're in a brutal division, they got 2 or 3 of the best prospects in baseball,
right?
And they're still a ways away,
right?
And then you got people here. Marlins Twitter's wanting Cedric Mullins here, acts like he's beholden to becoming a Marlin to help him rebuild them. Well, okay. Well, why should they trade Cedric Mullins to any contender if they're going to get penalized by moving him and losing more games? Because the Marlins, they're probably not going to finish 500 last year, but if they could have kept, you know, Adam Duvall and let him walk, they could have kept, you know, a few of those guys and let him walk, Starling Marte and let him walk, and finish close to 500 or closer, and probably been 10 under because they really weren't 500 with them.
Right.
Then what do you get out of it? So what do you gain? You're not helping. You're creating a market there. I see these conflicting points of view. Like, who are you going to trade with then?
Right.
Right now, the way the system's set up, and it had been more in the 90s with the money, the big money, just spending was winning.
Right.
And as someone who covered Giancarlo Stanton, who had covered Miguel Cabrera as Marlins, and read every day the big market teams thinking that Miguel Cabrera was theirs, Giancarlo Stanton was theirs, you know, You had at the All-Star game in 2016, David Ortiz, Big Papi, lobbying at the All-Star game for, and even before that, for Jose Fernandez to get traded to Boston when Jose was years away from free agency.
Right.
Obviously, we know what happened at the end of the summer, but Jose was one of the top pitchers in baseball and on his way to maybe being the best pitcher in baseball. There was openly tampering by a player, an active player. Oh, this guy should be on my team. But it was Big Papi and it's Boston. Everyone let it go.
Right.
But if you're a Marlin fan, you just sit around. Here we go again. So how do you allow that to happen? How do you, you know what I mean? It's like, how do you sit around and have all the teams like Miami's been forever, being everyone's minor league system? That's because of the big money. That's how that system worked, and it worked well for the big spending teams.
Right, and it's difficult to reconcile, right? Because theoretically as well, if you do place a cap on the big money contenders, you limit their ability to acquire at midseason. And then you end up with a bunch of teams kind of sitting around, you know, this is what I got. You maybe get a couple minor trades, but not really, you know, guys have to kind of just sit it out. And from the perspective of the small market players, for example, let's take Adam Duvall. I would wager to guess that Adam Duvall was happy with the way that things played out, being traded midseason, ending up back in Atlanta.
Of course.
And that's not to say that, you know, and I don't mean that in a way of like every small market player just wants out of their situation. But there is something to say for these guys, you know, especially let's take the Orioles, for example. You know, losing does weigh on players. And so at some point, those guys, I'm sure, would like the opportunity. Certain guys, there are some guys that want to stay and build with their teams, but some guys might want that midseason trade to come by and get the opportunity to play in October. It's like you said, there's a lot of contradictions there, and it's going to take a while for the league and players to sort it out.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know how. Yes, you could go negotiate numbers. You could, you know, okay, you got X number of dollars in the pool. How do you want to divvy that up? That's one thing. But when we're dealing with the theory, you know, an emotional theory, I want to play for winners. I don't want to be. Yes, we all do, obviously. You know, who wants to be? No one wants to cover. We don't want to have a podcast covering 100-loss team. You know, that's not the ideal way to draw interest to your podcast. So obviously, the better the Miami is and Florida is, the better ManOn2nd and everyone else that's doing podcasts and media as well. But, you know, how do you just will that? You know, when you
and it's,
you know, you don't, and yes, obviously, you know, veteran players will sign 1-year deals knowing they could be moved. Sergio Romo, he knew very good chance he was coming in on a team on the build, and if he does well, he get moved at the deadline. You know, so he got moved at the deadline, and he went to a playoff team, or I believe the Twins went to the playoffs that year, or he was certainly a contender. That, you know, that's kind of been the way it is. So I just don't know how you could sit around and just legislate it. How you could say, okay, well, you have to have X amount of payroll, but because I've seen players do this too, when the season's kind of lost. And guys are dealing with minor injuries or ailments, they're a little sore. Skip, I don't need to play today. You know, they're 15 under, but if they don't play now, the manager's got to run them out there, because if they lose 100 games, you know, they're going to, you know, appear to be tanking.
Right.
There's a lot of difference between that and then just, I get it. No, it's not the most ideal way to say, look, you know, and that's the other thing. If you only have 10 teams in the playoffs and you know you're basically like the 20th best team, and you know you're not there yet, do you keep your assets who are getting close to free agency, or move them to try to build for a better window to win? That's what this is all getting into now. Right. So is this being done to get rid of analytics? Is this being done to, you know, because analytics ain't going anywhere. I mean, that cat is out of the bag. You don't, you know, the genie's out of the bottle. It doesn't go back in.
Right.
You know. So, again, maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, from all angles, really, what's the tangible benefit to being a 77-win team?
14-team playoff, they might make a move and go to the playoffs with 80 wins. But yeah, you're right. There's no benefit.
Right.
How many times
Exactly.
are we seeing Marlin fans go, "Oh man, if we win 82, if we went 82 and 80, like they're going to feel much better about themselves."
Right, but it
You're still
doesn't.
missing the playoffs,
It
and
does. Yeah,
still,
it doesn't. It doesn't
you
get
know,
you anywhere.
yeah, maybe if you go to
So
the game, you don't see as many losses if you're a ticket holder, but it's not moving you anywhere. That's exactly the point.
I think I think generally speaking, the payroll thing, I would hope from just a common sense perspective that it's, you must have X amount on your books at the beginning of the season. It shouldn't be judged by the end of the season, because I don't think anybody can fault a team that goes into the season earnestly trying to win. It doesn't work. You blow it up at the deadline. That's the way that it, quite frankly, should work.
That's a good point. That's a really good point, because then it's at least, hey, we were going for it. It's like the 2012
Exactly.
Marlins when you had Jose Reyes and and Mark Burley, and they made those signings, and then they started trading away everybody. At least they went in a year with $100 million payroll and in belief and hope. Now they blow it up too fast, absolutely, but they were back then kind of rolling the dice that this team would equate to, just by having these players, would equate to full packed houses, and then they weren't getting the attendance they were hoping for, and that's what spawned that, and it really set everything backwards. But those moves also enabled them to sign Stanton, that the controversial trade with Reyes and so forth ended up being an interesting one, because the Marlins did get some good players and flipped them for more good players, and then they got competitive, although they weren't 500 when in that 15-16 range with D, and 14-15-16 they're a little bit funner team as Stanton was emerging and Jose was coming onto the scene, Yelich was getting better, Real Muto was coming up there. That kind of did. But right. Is this system now? Let me ask you this then: if they were to go with something like this, does this now mean like the 17 Marlins, who people are where they were 2 starters away? Do you keep it together? You're kind of forced to kind of keep it together and somehow try to find the 2 starters away, and so you're forced to keep the Stantons and the core there, or how do you think that would play out if this is a little bit more in play, or do you still have to kind of move and get a different look?
I think teams would find loopholes around stuff like this. For example, like the Stanton trade happening in the offseason. I think a lot of the housekeeping in terms of the clearing the books financially, things like that, it would change a lot of the off-season activity, and it would just happen in season more likely, because of the fact that there would be this, okay, well, we need you to at least kind of keep up the appearances that you're trying to contend here early in the season. And as that happens, teams kind of make those deals in season, which, for example, like a Stanton, it doesn't necessarily affect a guy like Stanton because he was already under contract for, as long as he was. Yeah. But it will affect the leverage of teams that, say you have a pitcher that doesn't have, or that has only X amount of control, and, you really want to deal them, in the off season, but maybe because of the money, you might have to wait until the following season. It does kind of cut your leverage. But ideally, I think that's how something like that would work, is that you would have a lot of those off season moves just happening in season.
Yeah. It would be fascinating. And hey, trust me, I'm not a big proponent of tanking, because I covered a lot of it and covered a lot of losses, and I know it's hard. It's hard to sit there and be demoralized and see the looks on players' faces and such. So anything, I remember back to in 05 or 06 when they, after winning the World Series, and 3 years later, they have $14-15 million payroll. That season ended up being kind of fun. The Girardi year in 06, but $15 million payroll. It was like ridiculous. And then to those kind of mood swings, basically, with your roster and your fan bases, it put the market in the ambivalent, baseball market that Miami has become, is because of moves like that.
Right.
So trust me, I'm not for that. I'm not condoning that.
No, absolutely.
And we want the Marlins to be doing more. And I believe they are trying to, but I think we've seen, and the Dodgers kind of proved it a few years back, and that model is holding true today. I believe it's more of a depth sport now than ever than a core sport. Because remember,
Right.
they got a good core, but they didn't have the depth. Now I think you could overcome core with depth if you have fitting pieces. Yes, you need impact, and this will kind of swing us over to our next topic there because we went longer on labor and I kind of wanted to, but
Right.
it moved along. So I think we gave the viewers some good insight. I hope to the Marlins. The minor league season is set to go on schedule. Guys not on the 40-man rosters are impacted, and the minor league, the Marlins right now up in Jupiter are conducting what they're calling their minor league development camp. It's an invite only. They got about 40 or so players out there. I went there last week. There's supposed to be some more access this week. Did talk to Yuri Perez and Max Meyer in particular. I missed talking to JJ Bleday, but I talked to him in the fall league. He apparently has gained about 20 pounds since this time. Last year, he's up to about 215, looking really, really built. And just our thoughts. I wanted to talk about that, and we're going to talk about the depth of the Marlins system because, as we were talking before we went on air live, Keith Law came out in The Athletic with his rankings of overall system, had the Marlins at 14. They were fourth last year, and we'll touch a little bit on the Rays, which went from number 1 to number 4. But we'll talk about the Marlins and kind of your thoughts of their farm system right now.
Yeah, I think that the Marlins farm system, in terms of overall depth, and even in frontline prospects, I think the depth is really good, and I think the frontline prospects that they have are a little underrated, quite frankly. And I understand that guys like JJ Bleday had a little bit of a down year last year, and I'm sure that certainly hurts a little bit. But I still see the upside with him. I know that the floor is a little scary, quite frankly, but I do think that he still has a really solid ceiling. I think gaining 20 pounds for a player like him in his mold, it's not like we expected Bleday to be a burner on the base paths, so I'm not really concerned about how that's going to really affect his mobility. I think that as a left-handed guy that's going to be projecting to 25 to 30 homers a season, that's fine by me. And then you have guys like Yuri Perez, who I think is probably he's definitely their best prospect at the moment. He's quite frankly, and I don't know, this might get into a little bit of the hot take kind of realm, but he's kind of tearing through the Marlins minor league system in a way that we haven't seen since Jose. And I don't know if that's unprecedented or not. I think that's not too far out of the realm to say.
Yeah, I'm going to start.
Yeah,
with we'll start with Yuri. He's not Jose, but
right.
Jose had 3+ pitches, maybe 4 at like 18 years old.
Right.
Yuri, I'm not sure the secondary pitches are plus right now. I think they're more average to plus. The breaking ball, his fastball in and out, the way he could put the ball wherever he wants it, and he's got enough velo, and the fact he's 6'8" and all arms and legs coming at you. He's got movement, he's got development, on the pitches, there's life, there's late life, there's a lot of really good stuff that when he spun his slider, it didn't even have to be close and guys would swing because it was, I'm not sure he could just drop that slider over the plate wherever he wants to, or he could, but
Right.
he's also the type could probably drop a bad slider in there and still make you, take it because you're just not, if you're not expecting it. So there in that regard, but yes, you are right that Jose reached the big leagues at 20. This kid might reach the big leagues at 19. Because he turns 19 in April, and the kid is really going to move fast. And so far so good in how he looks. And I agree with you. I think he's underrated. I say he's their best pitching prospect. I think their best prospect is Cahill Watson. I've spoken to people that thought he should have been number 1 in the draft last year. Bat speed's ridiculous. And I probably, if I had to have one or the other, I probably want the everyday player as much as I want an ace. But I agree. I think they're 1-2, and it's pretty narrow. It's not decisive. And I agree with you. I think the Marlins system, and I tweeted it this morning. Like I said, Keith Law had 14, and his rationale is fair. And I don't think it's a bad slip because you're noting that Meisner got traded and Kyle Nicholas and a few others got moved in the Joey Wendell and Jacob Stallings deals, Connor Scott among them. But I think that their best prospects, the ones that really get me excited, are the ones under 20. And those two, you got Jose Salas, who I think is going to be good. Yiddy Cappy. These are kind of shortstops who are that kind of big athletic bodies. Ian Lewis, who I don't put totally with those guys, but I think he's a big leaguer. Right. It's like those type of guys. I almost look at the Marlins system as two systems, the 20 and under and the 20 and over, because we're not even talking about Edward Cabrera, who could be potentially their best prospect this year. Prospect meaning reaching the big leagues and helping immediately, because we know because Edward got a taste of it last year. So that's what I like about their system. You just look at their 1 through 30, and I'd probably count 20 to 25 big leaguers. Victor Mesa Jr. is going to be a big leaguer and a good one, in my opinion. Burdick, Blade, even if he's a platoon guy, he's going to be a big leaguer, whether he's an all-star caliber or just more of or another everyday guy. But this guy I want to talk about, because I talked to him last week, and we did a nice little video we put up on our YouTube channel, the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel, and it's streamed on the ManOn2nd Twitter account. It's Max Meyer. Because Max is interesting. I like Max Meyer, and he's kind of this is how good their system is, that he's kind of being overlooked by us right now, based on the other guys we're talking about. But question is what's Max going to be? He's a college kid, but he's 6 foot. And yes, there is, you look at the body, is he a starter or is he a reliever? And dominating AA doesn't mean you're automatically a starter in the big leagues. And I guess that's my question with him, but there's so much I like about him, because I love the fire in the kid, and he threw the ball extremely well. When we saw him face, hitters in live BP. And granted, it's live BP early in a developmental camp. The hitters aren't going to be close to up to par. But you look at ball out of hand, you look how it moves, you look at the ability to throw strikes with the slider. Changeup's going to be a really big pitch for him. But touching 97 right away, and the slider anywhere 88 to 90. Now the question I have with him is, yes, he could be in the rotation, but where is he what does he project in the rotation? He's probably more, to me, from my people, what I'm hearing, more 4 or 5. And that's more of just, durability. How's he going to hold up and whatnot? Right. He might be a darn good closer, though. So do you see him more as this guy could be your Craig Kimbrell and you go there? Or do you want him in your rotation? And trust me, the kid will decide, and I'm not saying, scrap the starting thing, but I think that he might be their best closer right now. And the thing, as we know, a closer has an edge, has an attitude.
Right.
This guy's a hockey player growing up in Minnesota. He's a fighter. He's a scrapper. And he probably hears this and then make a man say, I'm a number 1. And that's fine. I want that. I want that in my player. I'm trying to be as objective about the player as possible, but that's what you want. You want the player to say, that guy's wrong about me, that girl's wrong about me, with their assessment. You want them to prove they're not that, or they're more. But, this sport, it does you settle into projectability. A lot of those analytics and a lot of the evaluations tend to be right. So you tend to look, and maybe early in a career, he is a starter, and then it becomes that. But very interesting. I want to know your thoughts on Max Meyer.
I think it is a situation where I think he'll give it an earnest go as a starter at first. And then ultimately, I do believe he will end up as a closer just because of like you said, the concerns about the frame. But in terms of the immediacy, I think he was, from a control standpoint, he was probably a little bit better than some of the questions about him pre-draft. And I know that was one of the big considerations as to putting him in the bullpen was, is he going to have the control to be a regular starter? I think for the most part, he's answered that question. And like you said, now it's just kind of the concern about the durability in the frames. And
three pitches. And you need three pitches.
Right.
And are those three pitches going to be there?
Right.
Unless you're that, like Pablo Lopez's changeup is so good and his fastball is good that third pitch, is a sinker, it's a little bit of a breaking ball. Pablo's getting away with it, but in general, you need three pitches at least to be a really good starter. So that's my question with him. But it's going to be fun to watch, and it's going to be fun to talk to him. I love, like I said, the attitude, the I'll show you, and that's fine. I love that.
Oh,
and we want to see, we want him to be, a stud. I want guys who want the ball. I want the guys who want it, not just in there like, I'm not just going to get you. I'm going to strike you out. I'm going to get you out. I'm going to, I want to dominate. I like those words, dominate.
Right.
Now, obviously, big leagues is much different. And you dominate the big leagues, that's one thing. Remember Juan Pierre one time saying about Jose Fernandez, because I said to him, this is, when Jose was really fun in 13, 14, 15, and you're talking to Juan Pierre, and it's like, yeah, he's having fun all the time because he dominated everyone. So I'd be laughing at, basically I'd be laughing and having a good time if I knew like 350 and steals 70 bags and steal without ever even, like, JP, as good of a base runner he is and fast as he was, he knew the pitchers, everything about their move, trying to get any little edge to steal that bag. Jose could throw a bad slider and you still swung at it. He has 98, 99 in the tank when he needs it. It's like, it's like he was that good that he could smile and have a good time and, laugh in the exchanges. So that, once you get into the big leagues there, dominating at this level, the highest level, it's a lot tougher.
Yeah.
Especially when the book's out on who you are. Early on, we see a lot of players, early success, but as they often talk about, second time, third time through, see not just the lineup in that day, but second, third time. Let's say, he's facing the Braves. The Max Meyer season, seeing Atlanta in April, let's say, is going to be, the Braves going to have a different look on him in August or September.
Right.
So it's just a constant evolution, but he's interesting. I'm rooting for him. I want him to, prove me wrong, be a starter. But man, I think he could be a lot of fun. And I'm not even talking about seventh or eighth inning guy. I'm talking closer.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what I'm doing. I'm seeing him there.
Right.
But Yuri, on the other hand, he's my only question. I think it's going to be fascinating with Yuri is to see how brave they are with him. Do they really? Is he going to make a hard decision, an easy decision? Would they do it? Would they bring him up in August to the big leagues if he's dominating at 19?
I mean, if they're contending, but in August, and they think that he can make a legitimate, if he can make a legitimate contribution to a playoff team, there's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things too. It's not just the physical. You got to be mentally prepared. And can you handle? How are you going to handle Wrigley Field, going nuts, or Citi Field, or in Atlanta, Truist Park, with once that late rally comes from Atlanta fans and that place goes nuts and you're out there and we've seen many a player, their knees become a little different once you're in that environment. Once they, if you have that it factor and you feel you can handle it and you can, that's a lot of fun. That's what I like to see and what you want to see with any team. There's no expectation now in the Marlins other than the expectation that the real diehard Marlin fan thinks they're better than people think. But you gotta prove it. It's more than just, they went into Atlanta like last year. Remember, everyone had a great time when they beat the Braves early in the year, and Acuna and Jazz were hugging on the field. Never thought that was wonderful. And then all of a sudden it's like August and the Braves have to win, and next thing you know, they're throwing at each other a little bit, and they all of a sudden that good stuff and the goody two shoe stuff, and the players all loving each other. It's a lot different when now it's money time. And so that's what I'm looking to see. That kind of growth. That's going to be whenever the season gets going. That's going to be the fun to see there. But I could be critical of the system and all, but I thought that overall, like I said, just looking at names, like the Marlins got guys in their bottom 10 that are going to be fine. And I'm not so sure. Oh, if we could just transition real fast to the Rays.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I want to give them a little love, and we'll get more into Tampa Bay as this thing rolls along and we get going. But they dropped from one from a year ago when you had Wander Franco, and to 4, and so I'm calling up their top 30 list. If I can figure this out, what do you think about our friends from the west point of the state? They just lost Tom Brady out there, so now it's up to the Rays to do it.
I mean, listen, the Rays are they're a well-oiled machine. It says a lot about the depth of their organization that they can graduate a generational prospect like Wander Franco. And of course they do add a couple of pieces. They add a nice piece in Kyle Nicholas, for example, from the Joey Wendell trade. But like I said,
Nicholas went to Pittsburgh.
Went to Pittsburgh. I apologize. Cam Meisner. They add Cam Meisner in the Joey Wendell trade. He's a nice toolsy prospect to add to that system. But like I said, it just speaks to the Rays kind of how they manufacture and develop.
Yeah, agreed. And again, them dropping to 4, they still probably could be 1. Because if you look at their minor league records last year, pretty much they have 3 teams, 1 championships or whatever, like 3 of their 4, or at least 2, and one of that low A team, they won like 60 games over 500, something ridiculous. And Shane Baz, number 1 ranked prospect, he pitched in the playoffs. Vidal Brujan, outfielder, that kid's gonna be a stud. Xavier Edwards is 3 on pipeline. I think the jury's out on him, but he's from down here. Josh Lowe, the guy to keep an eye on from my perspective, number 6 prospect Taj Bradley, who's got up to high A. That kid's gonna be a stud. Brendan McKay is 9. Remember, he's the two-way guy. He had some injuries. Our friend Curtis Mead, he's 14th on their list. That kid, I love to see the Marlins get him. Third baseman, a lot of power. I think he has a chance to be really good. Sandy Gaston, people may remember, Cuban defector.
Oh, man.
You remember when the Mesa brothers signed here? He's their 21st prospect. And Cam Meisner, I'm going to give Cam some love here. He's 22 on their prospect list on the Rays. I think he's going to be much better than that. I think he's going to be I think Cam Meisner is going to really be a very, very good big league player.
That just goes to show how loaded their system is. Yeah. Really.
Yeah. So again, we want to give them some love, give the Marlins system some love. Like I said, I'm going to flip over to the Marlins because I'm missing some names that I think that, I think the Marlins are going to be fine in terms of their system overall. I mean, when JJ Bleday might be your 8th prospect, you're probably pretty good. You know what I mean? If
you've got some legitimate wild cards too. For example, Sixto, and if Jake Eder comes back and he's still fine following the surgery, then that's a big boost.
I think Fulton, I'm really high on him. Dax Fulton, he's, I'm going to write a story on him. We talked to him a week ago. He's 9. Jose Salas, I mean, he's like a man-child. Nasim Nunez, more of a defensive guy, but, he has that chance to be that, early career Miguel Rojas type player, real heady, very good defensively. Peyton Burdick, tons of power. Yeti Cappy, 15th. Our boy, Zach McCambly, who we of course had on the pod. He's 16th, pulling for him. Victor Mesa, I'm a big fan of his. Griffin Conine at 20. Evan Fitterer, if healthy, we like him.
Yep.
Osiris Johnson, a lot of talent, but he's got to kind of put it together. Gerard Encarnacion, little disappointing, hasn't moved up. He's 24, but world of power. They're swing and miss in the game, but I've always liked him. There's intangible. He just looks the part to me.
Right.
And the guy just such easy power, and he could hit the ball out to right field as far as some lefty power bats hit it to right field. So I'm high on him. Nick Fortes and Peyton Henry are at the back end. There's some other names Marlin fans are familiar with, but that's a good system, and that's losing to Meisner, losing to Nichols. It's like that's a good solid system. Not the best, not top 5, but probably to me more closer to 10 than 15, to be honest. And that's being as fair as I can be. Just because I'm seeing big leaguers, I'm seeing big leaguers all around here. And even keep in mind, if you're a big leaguer as a platoon player, you're a big leaguer. Joey Wendell has made that into a pretty good player. So again, we need to resolve this. We need to not miss much of the season, and hopefully we'll get to there. But in the meantime, we at least got this show in. Felt a little bad we didn't go last week, but I was kind of frustrated, and I didn't, my heart wasn't in it, to be honest, because of some frustrations of what was going on labor talk. So hopefully we'll get a little better indication if the ball's going to move down the road a little bit. We'll know more at the end of the week.
Absolutely. Hopefully on the next podcast, it'll be a little bit less labor intensive talk.
Yeah, and we'll get Mike back. Mike's been dealing with some stuff. Our thoughts are with Mike and his family. But we got to get Mike back, and we're going to have a lot of fun. Then I'll get some guests back on. But I was wanting to kind of get a little bit ahead of some of this stuff and still touch on it. It's not our time yet with baseball. The Super Bowl usually marks the end of football season from, the eyes of the fans in general, and then baseball kind of takes center stage, and let's hope that it's taken center stage after Sunday's game. And let me ask you, who do you like in the Super Bowl?
Give me the Rams. I think that Cinderella run ends.
Yeah, I'm agreeing, and that's not that I'm anti the Bengals and whatnot. Joe Burrow's a hell of a quarterback, and it's a fun team, and a lot of good stuff. I just kind of really gained a lot of respect for Stafford. You just see the tools just jump out at you, and listen to that defense. I think the Rams defense is going to. I mean, didn't Tennessee sack Burrow about 8 or 9 times?
10 times.
10 times. And they lost the game.
Yeah.
Only because Tannehill decided to make a terrible decision. Yep. The only thing that's going to overtime if you don't get picked off at midfield. It's ridiculous that happens, but I guess that makes it fun. But so enjoy the Super Bowl. Thanks for being on, Eric. We appreciate all you do, my friend. And one last quick shout out to Dugout Mugs. Let's, you see it here. You see dugoutmugs.com/ManOn2nd. Order yours today. Use that link because that helps us out. And, we're kind of building this. If you like what you see, and we're enjoying what we're doing. So we want to keep this momentum going.
Absolutely. And as always, you can catch the podcast on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. And you can also follow us, any posts, as well as we stream the podcast on Twitter. And that's going to be at ManOn2nd, at ManOn2nd on Twitter. Thank you so much, Joe, and we'll see you guys next time.
Okay.